Hello everyone, welcome to a video that a couple of people in YouTube comments have asked me to prepare. And the question that this video is intending to answer is, when should someone consider making the move from single player into multiplayer in DCS Warbirds? Now, whilst I am mostly focusing on DCS multiplayer, I think this content probably applies to the other Warbird sims as well, and to a lesser extent the modern aircraft. I will be mainly focusing the content of this video on Spitfires, so for those of you who fly the Spitfire in single player and are looking at moving through to multiplayer, this is primarily for you. So if you're looking for a quick, too long, didn't listen to the whole video version, and you want a quick answer to the question, when should I make the move to multiplayer? Well, my answer for you is, you should do it as soon as possible. There are two main reasons, I think, why people should make the move as soon as possible. The first one is, if you're like me and you spent a number of years or months playing in single player before making the move to multiplayer, you will always look back thinking that you probably should have done it earlier. It's not really a regret, it's just a feeling that I could have made the move earlier, and you're never quite sure what was stopping you from doing so. Multiplayer is a lot of fun. It's a lot more unpredictable than single player, and I think it's where a lot of the real shine of a flight sim, particularly a World War II flight sim, comes to the fore. I think if you stay with single player, you're missing out on a lot of that. The second reason I think people should make the move as soon as possible is that multiplayer has a very steep learning curve, and the sooner you can get yourself on that curve, the sooner you can progress and not only survive but be competent in multiplayer. Putting it off until you get better and better at single player is not necessarily going to prepare you for multiplayer, so you might as well just make the move anyway. Okay, so with that said, let's move on to some more detailed content. For those people who really are nervous about getting into multiplayer and want to kind of assure themselves that they've reached a minimum standard that will not serve to result in them being too frustrated, I've got a list of 6 kind of areas I think players should just check if they're comfortable with these things, if they're competent in these areas, and then make the move across to multiplayer. Now, this does kind of contradict what I said in the intro section of the video, where I said that the learning curve in multiplayer is quite steep and single player will never really prepare you for it. I stand by that statement. I'm not suggesting these things will prepare you adequately for multiplayer, but they may just give you a little bit of confidence to make the move across if you need it. So the very first item on my list is prepare yourself mentally for frustration. When I first moved from single player to multiplayer, considered myself to be a bit of a single player ace. However, I first played multiplayer in IL2 Cliffs of Dover a number of years ago, and I suddenly found myself from being this single player superhero to an absolute terrible pilot online. I was getting shot down day after day. I never saw the guys who were shooting me. I couldn't catch them. I couldn't shoot them. I was getting airborne and getting shot down within minutes, and it was thoroughly frustrating. So the first thing I would say to anyone is, no matter how good you are in single player, you are likely to be frustrated when you move to multiplayer. And as long as you're prepared to face that frustration, then you will get the rewards of playing in multiplayer. There are a few things that will happen to you that you have to be aware of when you make the move. No see kills. These are when you're just flying along, you think you've cleared the airspace, you think no one's around you, and someone shows up out of nowhere and kills you. This will happen a lot. There's the I'm sure I hit him feeling. This is when you're chasing someone, you think you've emptied your entire magazine of ammunition into him and he just doesn't appear to be damaged or hit. And there's the old he must be cheating frustration. This is when you come across someone that seems to be doing things that are just outside of the physical ability of the aircraft or its pilot. These are all frustrations that we feel, especially when we're new to multiplayer. We see aircraft doing things that the single player aircraft just don't do. and it's very frustrating. However, that frustration will pass, and it may take months. It took me, when I first started playing online sims, about 6 months just to be competent and comfortable in the online environment, and I was probably flying 2 or 3 days a week, 2 or 3 hours per time, so it mounted up. But over 6 months it took me to really feel comfortable online. That was in Cliffs of Dover a number of years back. It probably then took me 1 to 2 years to be not only competent but confident online. I wouldn't say I was a super ace, but I certainly developed a level of confidence. I'm now about 1.5 years into flying the Spitfire in DCS, and only now do I feel like I'm really finding my feet. And even now, when I go into flying IL-2, Battle of Stalingrad or Battle of Kuban, I get my body kicked within minutes of getting airborne. I'm still very much a newcomer to the IL-2, the new IL-2 series. So frustration, you will feel it. You have to kind of bear with it and persist, and it may take months. If you're an average to slow learner like I am, then you can expect the frustration to last, but it will pass eventually. Item number 2 on my list is that you should be comfortable flying in single player on full realism. And in particular here, I'm talking about flying with those labels turned off. When you go into multiplayer, most of the servers, except for some of the low realism ones, they'll all have the labels off, and you'll have to ID aircraft first with your eyeball just to pick out whether there is or is not an aircraft in the airspace, and then you will have to use your eyes again to identify what kind of aircraft it is, and then you'll have to use your eyes even more to work out where he's going, what he's doing. You will not have labels for any of this. Most of the time you'll simply be staring at a little black pixel on your screen. So the best way you can prepare yourself for this is to play single player, get into some single player missions with lots and lots of aircraft at many different ranges, and just fly around, try and track them, try and ID them, put yourself in combat situations where those AI are shooting at you, and get used to those labels being off. Once you're comfortable flying around with the labels off, and you think you know what's going on around you, then you could probably put this one to bed. But certainly if you're a single player person looking to fly multiplayer, get used to having those labels turned off. Item number 3 on my list is be comfortable with basic maneuvering of your aircraft. And I'm not just talking about flying around willy-nilly here. What I recommend you do is you learn a series of set aerobatic maneuvers. So we're talking about nice clean barrel rolls, try learning vertical rolls, and try and get yourself through 3 rolls in the vertical before you roll off the top. Try to learn how to conduct a stall turn at low altitude and at medium altitude. And if you can pull off a stall turn with the engine falling over the aircraft with rudder input only, and you can keep the aircraft from wobbling, then that's a really good skill to learn. Practice max rate turns and tight braking turns, and then also practice flying along and pushing the nose forward and doing some rolls with the nose in the forward position. If you're really up for it, you can fly down the runway at about 100 or 200 feet and try some slow rolls. Be very careful though, because the aircraft will drop altitude very quickly in the slow roll. It's really not a maneuver that's suited to the Spitfire. Perhaps the World War Warbirds are more suitable for this kind of move. But if you can pull off a slow roll flying down the runway at a few hundred feet, then that's really nice. Also, when you are conducting fast rolls, let's say you're flying along and you want to do a roll into a break, practice what it's like to roll the aileron and kick the rudder in the same direction at the same time, and get used to that feeling of how much rudder you need to kick in and how quickly you need to punch the foot in and then pull the foot off. What you should be looking for when you're learning all these basic maneuvers is to keep the aircraft in trim, to maintain your airspeed, and to maintain the desired altitude. For those of you who are interested, I could perhaps put a video together of some basic maneuvering in the Spitfire. The purpose of this is not obviously to show off your skills. The purpose of this is to become familiar with how the aircraft handles and to get used to moving it about the sky in a smooth manner without getting out of trim and without the nose bouncing around. The more you do these maneuvers, the more familiar you'll become with the aeroplane and the more competent you'll be in handling it in a dogfight situation. The maneuvers, the basic aerobatic maneuvers, you don't normally use them in combat. It's seldom you'll string certainly a stall turn into another maneuver in these World War II aircraft, but occasionally it might be called for. The purpose is not to use these maneuvers in combat. The purpose is to take the skills and the handling practice so that when you are in combat and you're yanking that aircraft around, that fluidity stays with you. Item number 4 on my list is actually something I made another video on about 2 years ago, I think. I made a series of videos of tips for combat pilots, and one of those videos focused on this item, which is to learn to fly with your head facing backwards, and in particular to become competent at conducting braking turns with your head backwards. So this is where you're doing a sharp turn to the left or the right. You're looking behind to keep track of the bandit behind you, and you're pulling as much into that turn as you can without the nose flying up or down and the aircraft getting unstable. It's a very important skill to be able to do in the Spitfire. You're going to spend a lot of time with 109s and 190s on your 6 in sharp horizontal turns. And if you're facing forward, you will often find that you lose sight of the bandit. You're not quite sure when he's off you and when you can relax the turn. And if you're not used to doing this facing backwards, you'll find the turns get very sloppy, the nose will climb, you'll get low on airspeed and you'll stall, and you'll flick the aeroplane out of the turn and get killed. So spend some time in single player learning how to do brake turns with your eyes behind you, looking at the airspace behind. Number 5 on the list is learn how to deal with overshooting. One of the mistakes a lot of new players make when they are chasing down an enemy aircraft is that they don't realize how fast they're closing. Although closing quickly in the Spitfire isn't something that happens often, but it does happen occasionally, especially if you're attacking a slightly damaged airplane or a heavier aircraft than a single-engine fighter. So you'll be closing very fast, and suddenly the aircraft is filling up your gun sights, and before you can get your trigger away, you've either 1. Collided with him, or 2. Done something silly, got the aircraft unstable, and you're flying out in front of him and he shoots you down. There are 1 or 2 things you can do when you overshoot. You can drop the aircraft down below, or you can climb up above and save energy. Most players would probably recommend the second of these 2 options, is that you should convert your excess airspeed into altitude. So as you're closing on the bandit, you suddenly realize that he's way too close. Gently pull the stick, don't yank it. It doesn't take much on the elevator in the Spitfire to get the nose up. And then arc up, make a small roll. About 90 degrees should be enough, and that way you can generally keep your eyes on your opponent down beneath your wing root. Climb up until you've bled off about 100 miles per hour or so. You still need to be doing about 180 in this vertical climb. If the climb starts getting below 180 miles per hour, 1, you can stall out, 2, you can blow the engine, and 3, you present a nice slow moving target for someone else to come and destroy. At about 180, then you need to continue the roll and remove the vertical component of your climb, keeping eyes on your bandit, and then you can set up for a second attack. This will happen to you quite a lot in multiplayer. It probably happens to you quite a lot in single player, but this is a good skill to learn, as how to deal with an overshoot. So there you have it. That would be my list of the main things I would look at or try to achieve or practice if you're someone who wants to move from single player to multiplayer but perhaps is feeling a little nervous and wants a bit of confidence. However, that said, I will repeat what I said at the start of the video, that no amount of single player really can prepare you properly for multiplayer. The first maybe up to 50 hours or so of multiplayer is going to be pretty harrowing. Certainly was for me. And it took months and perseverance to get confident in the multiplayer environment. However, your first multiplayer kill will be something you remember for a long time. There is a real rush of adrenaline you get, particularly when you first start playing multiplayer. When you get behind a bandit and you're about to open up for that first time. I remember getting so nervous and excited at times that I would fire so wildly that my ammunition went nowhere near my target. And had I only been calm, they would now be, I would say, easy victories. But that was just the level of excitement and emotion and adrenaline I experienced when I first made the move to multiplayer. It's a very cool thing, and I don't know what it is about it, but when you're up against another human, it just raises the bar. And there's something about the way our brains respond to that, our competitive nature, that can be incredibly rewarding. So there we go. I hope that was helpful for those that asked for it. I know this isn't the kind of normal thing for my channel, but I try to help people out where they request it. I hope that was helpful. I hope in the end that it assists people with making the move online. So that said, happy hunting, and I'll see you up there.